If you're watching this video, there's a very good chance you're not in China. YouTube has been blocked there since 2009. The government has always maintained tight control over who knows what in the country, and the rest of the world often doesn't really know much more. Sometimes though, the truth does get out, and there's nothing the government can do to stop it. Let's look at the most famous examples of that. Please don't come after me, China. My name is Danny Burke, and this is the top 10 scary Chinese cover-ups. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the explosions. On August 12, 2015, a series of explosions at a storage station in Tianjin killed 173 people and injured 100 more. The second explosion involved the detonation of about 800 tons of ammonium nitrate. It was a very big bang. A later investigation found that an overheated container was to blame. At the time though, China tried to cover up the casualties, cause and the damage. The government's Cyberspace Administration issued a directive barring any coverage of the disaster without governmental approval. The resistance was strong though. A young Beijing reporter named He Xiaojin snuck into the area and transmitted horrific images showing the world it was a lot worse than the government was letting on. This caused an avalanche of clips to be uploaded. Within just 2 days, the government had ordered social media sites to shut down 160 accounts permanently and to suspend a further 200. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Wenzhou train collision. On July 23, 2011, two high-speed trains in China's Zhejiang province crashed into each other and derailed. 40 people were killed, at least 192 injured, including 12 severe injuries. Officials responded with a scrambled rescue operation in which they chose to actually bury the train carriages nearby. Obviously, that's not what most countries do when there's an accident that kills 40 people. There's usually an investigation. China's media and online communities were outraged by this. Did the government then apologize and reverse their decision? No, they actually tried to cover it up even more. The government issued directives to restrict media coverage. Basically, everyone was expected to not talk about it and pretend the whole thing never even happened. Most people didn't listen though. Even state-owned TV networks reported the full story. The cover-up failed, an official investigation was launched, and China has not experienced a major crash like it since. Moving on now to number 8, we have the AIDS crisis. In the early 2000s, the world was beginning to learn about the AIDS crisis that was gripping China. 10 years before that, there were thousands of people with HIV, but this had now risen to 2 million. UN officials predicted that figures could rise into the tens of millions over the next few years, leading to almost 20 million deaths in China. The Chinese government downplayed all of this though and denied there was a crisis at all. This may have something to do with them apparently being to blame for its spreading. You see, the New York Times reported that the government oversaw blood collection programs from poor people who had HIV, pulled the blood and extracted the plasma and then re-injected the blood back into the donors. The government arrested a leading doctor for speaking out about this and even banned journalists from visiting the areas. Next up at number 7 now, we have the floods. In 2017, the Chinese government admitted to a major cover-up of floods in 2012. Authorities in 2 cities in Liaoning province publicly admitted that the previously released death tolls were deliberately underreported but did not provide updated numbers. The municipal government said in a statement that an initial report that there had been no casualties in the flood was not true and that there had been a concealment. In reality, at least 7 people had been killed. A neighboring government also admitted they had underreported their deaths, saying it was 5 when in fact it was at least 38 people. The fact that this even came out is somewhat of a success. In the early days of communist rule, it was not uncommon for the government to cover up death tolls from natural or man-made disasters. Moving on to number 6 now, we have SARS. In 2003, a senior Chinese doctor accused his government of covering up details about the spread of SARS. He said that doctors and nurses at 2 other military-run institutions told him at least 7 deaths have occurred in their hospitals and claimed there were 106 cases of the disease in Beijing, more than 5 times the figure announced by authorities. The Chinese government faced criticism from home and abroad about its slowness in releasing information about the outbreak. The health ministry and other offices declined to release details about deaths and causes of infection. At number 5 now, we have the Great Leap Forward. This was an economic and social campaign by the Communist Party of China from 1958 to 1962. It aimed to rapidly transform the country into an industrialized nation. It's arguable if it reached its goals, but many people do feel that it was definitely responsible for the Great Chinese Famine that followed, an event which experts think killed between 20 and 43 million people. The Chinese government has long since downplayed that number, saying 15 million is the correct amount. On top of that, they still don't take responsibility for the government's policies being to blame for the starvation of tens of millions of people. They often blame it on bad weather. To this day, there is little public information inside China about this dark event. There is no museum, no monument, or remembrance day to honor those who died. Next up, at number 4 now, we have the milk. In 2008, it was revealed that one of China's biggest dairy producers received consumer complaints about its baby milk formula 6 months before they had recalled it. The reason for the recalls was because of concerns that it had been mixed with a toxic industrial chemical and was now just killing babies. Despite knowing about this, the company waited 6 months as 53,000 infants got sick and 4 were killed across China. The local government had delayed acting on the complaints and warnings as well. There has been much speculation that this was all because of the Beijing Olympics that were about to happen. It's thought that government officials were attempting to cover up the scandal and pressure journalists to not release any negative news about the country while the whole world was watching them. In the short term, this may have worked, but safety experts say the delays may have allowed tainted milk supplies to spread more widely, harming tens of thousands of children. Coming at number 3 now, we have the smog. In 2017, China was going through perhaps one of its worst smog periods ever. As usual, local weather groups went to report their smog alerts, but this time the government just stopped them. They told them to stop issuing smog alerts, causing many people to fear they were trying to suppress information about the country's air pollution. The government denied all of this though, and they said they were going to issue alerts under one department now to stop different groups issuing contradictory alerts, confusing schools and factories on whether or not they should close. Critics didn't buy this though. They said the government simply wants more control over what constitutes a bad smog day so they can massage the figures. Next up at number 2 now, we have the earthquake. On May 12, 2008, a deadly earthquake struck the Chinese province of Sichuan. Estimates put the death toll at an astonishing 80,000 people. At least 10,000 of that is thought to be children who were in school at the time. More than 8,000 families lost their only child in this disaster. The official number issued by the government doesn't exist. In the year that followed, anger from the parents made the government go silent and refused to even acknowledge them. The families blamed the poor construction of the schools for the deaths of their children. They went on to say they were then being harassed by the government for even speaking out about it, sometimes detained for up to 3 weeks for trying to get answers about how their children died. The youngest detainee was just 8 years old. And finally, number 1 now, we have Tiananmen Square. Some of you guys may have heard of this. In 1989, weeks of student protests against the Chinese government came to a head on June 3rd. The army was called in to deal with the protesters who had filled up Beijing's Tiananmen Square. They opened fire on the protesters, leading to the deaths of up to 10,000 civilians. Yeah, you heard me right. 10,000. Chinese government said the official figure was just 218. They arrested many remaining protesters, expelled foreign journalists, and strictly controlled the coverage of the events in the press. 2 news anchors who reported on the event on TV were actually fired by their state-owned channel because they displayed sad emotions. Despite the cover-up attempt, the event has gone down in history as an important protest for freedom and the dangers of authoritarian government. Okay, well, all of that is public knowledge anyway, so hopefully I haven't upset the Chinese government with any of these stories today. Which one of them did you find the most shocking though? Do you think governments should be more open? Are there certain things they should always keep secret? Let me know your opinion. Thanks for watching. As always guys, I am Danny Burke and I will see you all in the next video.